All right. Thank you all for coming. I am Daniel Hanna, and today we are going to be seeing a presentation by our friend Zack Schuster. It's going to be an intro to semantic HTML and accessibility. And later tonight, we will also have Joanne Rocafort here for our Ask a Designer section. And without further ado, if you're ready, Mr. Schuster.
Mr. Schuster.
Yes. Here I am. So let me click on a few things here. I'll share my screen with everybody. Here we go. As the good gentleman mentioned before, my name is Zack Schuster. So we're talking about semantic HTML and accessibility today. Accessibility, if you're not aware, is basically the ways of communicating information to people who have some sort of information processing kind of impairment. So, for instance, that could be dyslexic people, blind people, deaf people, et cetera, et cetera. If there is a way where, like, you download a browser, you download Chrome, for instance, or you open up Chrome and you go to a web page, and you have some way or some problem that prevents you from processing something on that web page, accessibility is there to help you bridge the gap. And with regards to web browsers and web pages, the predominant way that you achieve accessibility, or that you make your web page accessible or more accessible, is with semantic HTML. And all that really is the use of tags and attributes to encode information into your site. So basically, what that means is that you're always doing some form of semantic HTML when you're writing HTML, because all tags and attributes encode information, right? You use a style tag, and it defines some styles for different elements. You use a paragraph tag, and there's some text inside of it. You use a body tag, and you say, okay, this is the actual body, the actual presentational stuff that I'm using for my website. So all HTML is semantic to some degree. It has some meaning connected to it that's encoded within it, that it's sharing with you when you're loading in that web page, or when someone else is loading in that web page. So this is kind of a double-edged sword, because it means that by default, all HTML is accessible. All HTML provides information to these different technologies and different things that you're using to improve your life. So what's very easy to do is that you then can misuse these different elements and different attributes, and you can end up breaking the semantics. And we're going to look at some different ways that you can break semantics, but mostly we're going to be looking at ways to do things correctly, the correct way that you're supposed to be doing things. So I think there's one or two examples of some do nots, but it's really just mainly going to be, this is what good looks like, so that you can look at this information later on or whatever, and you can go, okay, this is what good looks like, and I don't need to worry about figuring out whether this is the bad or the good section or anything like that. So try to keep it simple to that degree. But one thing I also want to point out is that accessibility and semantic HTML and all this isn't just for these assistive technologies I mentioned. That's the most well-known example. When you say accessibility, that's usually what people jump to thinking of, is stuff like screen readers, where you're going to be reading a site's main content or its navigation menu to somebody. But really, like, anytime that you interact with a web page, and you use something like a JavaScript query, for instance. That's an example of semantic HTML and accessibility, and of that information being represented to you in a different way that fulfills, like, I guess, what you would call it, a non-standard purpose. So we have 4 different sections that we're going to be looking over. I'm going to start with some kind of rules, and this is going to be like things that I think you should do at all times. If you take nothing else away from this, I hope these are kind of these rules are going to be the things that you take away. Is like, this is what I have to keep in mind whenever I'm writing a web page. Next, we're going to look at tags. We're going to look over a list of different types of tags in HTML, and we're going to kind of go over what those are used for, the different purposes for that. And then we're going to go over some very common attributes as well, and how you use those to communicate information. And then finally, at the very end, we're going to look at an example HTML page, document that I wrote. Not an it's just an example of the code. It's not going to be actually something you would actually see on a page, just an example of these patterns for use. So we'll start off with the rules. Not too many, but the first one that I want you to see here, I've bolded it and I italicized it, is care about your users. Accessibility is not an end goal. It's not like a finish line you cross. There's definitely bound to be always some way for you to be able to make your site more accessible. Let me zoom in really quickly. There we go. Is that better? Cool. Sorry, did somebody say that in the chat? I didn't see. I can't see the chat right now. So if somebody mentioned that earlier, I apologize. Here's the README again, if you want to look over that really quickly. I'll point out really quick too that I got a lot of this information I'm going to present from the MDN web docs, and they have a lot of different good guides on different kind of more jumping off points with regards to accessibility. So there's a list of links here as well. So after the talk, if you want to check those out, you can go to the GitHub. I'll post a link to the GitHub repo, and then you can go there and you can check out these links, which I recommend you do. They have lots of very good information. So anyway, back to the rules. So like I said, care about your users. You can't stop, basically. You always want to be thinking about what am I doing here, and what am I trying to communicate here. Like I said before, HTML is always communicating information by its very nature, because it's structured markup for a document. So whenever you're writing down these tags, it's like, is this the right tag that I'm using? Can I structure this better? How will this be read aloud by a screen reader? These are things that you can think about and should be thinking about whenever you're writing your websites. It's going to go a very, very long way towards making sure, much more so than memorizing a list of rules or definitions for tags. That's going to guide you the best with regards to using semantic HTML and using accessibility to their fullest potential. So the rest of the rules, they're much harder than that. First is always use an anchor for links. So the anchor tag, the A tag, whenever you're trying to link to another file or another website or another page in your website, always use an anchor tag. The reason why for that is because anchor tags they have all the support built into them. So that's the thing with these rules, is that this is all considered like native stuff. So this is the stuff that's built in directly, and that's the stuff that everybody builds on top of. And even the browsers themselves, with the way that they handle things by building on top of these the different things built into this. So one big example, for instance, is you want to read aloud, for instance, the navigation elements of a page. Navigation elements are ways to get to other things, right? So they're going to look for links. So they're going to look for these anchor tags. And if you don't put them inside of an anchor tag, they're not going to see it. The screen readers or these other different assistive technologies, they're not going to be able to see it at all. So somebody's trying to look on your website for a link to page 2, and you put it and use like a div or something for that with some JavaScript. They're not going to be able to know what that is. Not just that, but there's other stuff. There's also things like keyboard accessibility. And so with links, for instance, you can, if you're a keyboard user, you can control click on a link and it'll automatically open it up in a new tab. And that's something you would have to manually replicate yourself if you're using some other method. So always use an anchor tag for your links. Similar to that, you should always use a button for buttons. So when that's literally like, I want to submit a form. Well, you can use the input type equals submit as well. But I want to open up a menu, or I want to close something, like dismiss an element or something like that. You should pretty much always use a button for that, because for very similar reasons to the anchor tags. The next is you should use the header tags in order. So that's your H1 through H6. The reason for that is that these elements get read aloud in the order that they're defined. So a lot of people, they use these tags for different, for like styling purposes. So it's like, oh, hey, the H1 is really big. It's really big text. So I'm going to put that in the middle of my document because I want to shout something as like a joke, for instance. That is really, really bad, because then when a screen reader goes to the page and it looks at the H1, it's going to see your big shouty joke, and that's going to be the very first thing it reads out to somebody. So terrible way to introduce your content, terrible way to experience content. So what you want to use your H1s through your H6 or whatever for is for headings. Essentially, that's what the H stands for, is for heading. So a site heading, a section heading, an article heading, et cetera, et cetera. And you use it in that level of hierarchy. So at your H1, that's going to be your site navigation, or your site title, I should say, your site heading. Your H2, that would be a section heading. Your H3, an article heading, and so on and so forth. But whatever makes sense for the structure of your websites, you should be using the headings in your order. Yeah, Louis, you shouldn't use buttons with hrefs. That's a really bad idea. You also should not use anchor tags as buttons. I know people do that as well. It's possible, but it's really bad. So the next rule, the next is use labels with inputs. So I have an example of this later on when we're talking about attributes. I won't go too much into it, but basically, if you want to, so say you're writing out a form and it's like, okay, I would need a first name and a second name, or first name and a last name, I mean. Then you should have, with your first name input, you should have a label that says first name. And with your last name input, you should have a label that says last name. So you have a drop down for states. You should have a label with that select list that says state or something like that. That's what communicate. That's the built-in way of communicating what the name, essentially the label, literally the label for these different form controls is. The next rule is to use unique ID attributes for each element. This one is also really, really important because ID is meant to be it's the native way of identifying. That's what ID is short for, identifying an element. This is actually according to the HTML specification. That string, that value that you give it, it has to be unique. And if it isn't, then it causes all sorts of havoc. It'll render correctly. As far as, you'll be able to actually see the web page and stuff, but behind the scenes, it'll just cause a gigantic mess. Not just with regards to screeners and stuff, but it can also slow down the browser itself because it'll force it to do all sorts of extra unnecessary work because of the different things that it relies on with these semantics. So the next rule is about about Arya attributes. I'm not really going to go into Arya very much for this. Some people would consider it a very significant part of accessibility in Semantic HTML. I do as well, as far as knowing that it exists and knowing that when you're trying to communicate things, if there's something that HTML natively doesn't allow you to say, or that it would be very difficult to say natively with HTML, then that's when Arya comes in. And so I've got a couple examples of Arya as well. Probably to what I can think of, probably the most common one when you're dealing with these kind of hard to communicate things. But for the most part, you can get away with just knowing HTML and having a baseline accessible page from that. And then you can go from there and you can build on top of that with these Arya attributes for things that, like I said, HTML natively doesn't do. So the last thing is a do not, and that's don't use table for layouts. So table, T-head, T-body, TR, TD, all that stuff. This is kind of an old school thing from way back in the day. Because browsers used to be a lot simpler, essentially, and they're not anymore. They're practically entire application platforms now. So use the specific features that are going to that are actually designed for that stuff. So stuff like Flexbox and CSS Grid. Mainly CSS is what I want to be pushing you towards. Is instead of using table and hacking together with width and stuff like that, really bad. Excuse me. Really bad, does lots of terrible things to screen readers, to assistive technologies. Use CSS for figuring out the layout of your website, for arranging that stuff. It's much, much more powerful. In fact, you can even have like multiple different CSS files that switch the exact same markup into wildly different layouts, depending on how you write it. So you don't need to encode that information into the HTML itself. You can get a lot more power and flexibility by using CSS. So don't sacrifice assistive technologies for something that isn't really even benefiting you. That's kind of what I'm pushing for there. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about anything I've said so far? Cool. So next up, we'll be talking about tags, different tags. So just kind of a brief overview here, kind of a list of different kind of tags and what they're doing. So there's a few, this is my kind of organizational thought process for this. This isn't sourced from anywhere else. But I kind of see these attributes as fitting into kind of 5 major buckets. The first is metadata, and that's just information about the document itself, as far as like, oh, this is the title of the document, here's your base tag, this is different meta things like the content type of the document, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or it could be links to external resources, like for instance, script tags or style sheet tags via the link tag itself. Things that should be loaded in order to present the documents in a specific way. Next is kind of structural elements. And a lot of these are ones that were added recently. And by recently, I mean in the HTML5 spec, which actually I believe is like 10 is it 10 years old now as HTML5 spec? I'll have to look that up. But these are different tags that correspond to different purposes in a document. So some of these are self-explanatory, like a header and a nav and a main, etc. Some of them less so. So in aside, that's like, so for instance, you're inside of an article and you want to include a little bit of aside content, like a parenthetical kind of note. You can use an aside for that. And then another one is field set. And field set is kind of a way of grouping different elements together and saying that these should be treated as one unit. So if you've got a form with multiple sections, you can group the different sections together using field sets, and then you can label them all using the legend tag. So the next part is the actual content of the document. So that's going to be your stuff like your paragraph tags with your text in it, tables with tabular data, like a data table, images and sound and video for multimedia. You also have stuff like the figure tag. The figure tag allows you to, you can have multiple images or an image with other bits of multimedia or something like that. You can have multiple of those in one area. And then those can be treated as like an image set or a multimedia set. And then you can give it a unified label with the fig caption. You also have stuff like the progress elements. The progress element allows you to say like, okay, I've got 0 to 100% on this upload. We're at 66%. Or we've got 255 items that we're uploading, and we are through uploading 120 of them. Oh, we just finished another 5, so now we're up to 125. So it's stuff where you're continually moving forward. You say, okay, I've uploaded X amount of percent, I've uploaded X amount of these items, et cetera, or processes, I should say. So the next one is meter, and that's more of a capacity one. So, you know, I've got 100 items, I've taken out 50 items, I'm down to 50. Okay, I put 25 back in, I'm to 25. So it's bi-directional. So where progress is always, you know, you're always conceivably moving forward. You're making progress. Meter is just like more keeping track of supply of something or number of something. So the next two, legend and label, those are kind of also a little bit of metadata stuff. So that's the stuff that literally gives a label to something. Legend corresponds to like a legend in a map. So for like a field set, and I believe for there are other elements that use legend as well. The legend allows you to say like, okay, this is what this set of information is saying. And then the label is meant for just describing a single element. So the next section is actions. And these are things that allow interaction with your documents. So that's your anchor tags and buttons, like I mentioned before. But it's also stuff like input tags and select and option tags and text areas that is like inputting information for you to like send over HTTP or have processed locally for some purpose, like a calculator or something like that. And then the final category, I call this kind of the miscellaneous category. It's divs and spans. These are kind of the original tags, the first two, the primordial soup of tags. You can express everything with these ultimately if you work hard enough and you do enough with attributes of JavaScript and stuff. You can express and encode everything else that is done for you by the browser within these tags. I wouldn't recommend it unless you absolutely have to, but it's an option there on the table for you. All right, so now we're on the second to last section, and that's some common attributes. So these are probably the most common attributes that you're going to be using in HTML. There are many more. And in fact, I mentioned Arya before. Arya itself has many, Louis. Very many. That's how many there are. But Arya itself has dozens, if not hundreds, of attributes. I have no idea how many attributes exactly they have, but they're you know, I looked at the spec once, and it goes on and on and on, and then it links to other documents that go on and on and on, that link to themselves, that link to other documents, that link back to them, and go on and on and on. Just a gigantic soup of all these different attributes and their interactions. So there's a lot to know, and that's kind of loops back into what I was saying before about caring about your users. Is that if you want to take this talk and use it to jump off into the deep end of, I want to be an expert and know everything about Arya. I want to be an expert and know everything about, how you're supposed to generate content. There's an embarrassment of riches for you, essentially. But for this talk, I'm just going to focus on kind of the common examples, and that'll kind of prepare you for most of what you're going to see, or at least a large amount of what you're going to see and want to do with a website. So the first is the ID, and like I mentioned before, that's a unique identifier for an element. When you're programming with JavaScript, you usually use this when it's like, okay, I want to just select this one element, and I want to interact with this one element in some way, or I want to do, and you want to get at it very easily. You could do that with the ID, but it's also primarily a way of signaling that a label or an element is meant to be connected to describe this. So in the first example, simple form with just a text input, and it has a label that says input 1. So the ID for input is input 1 right there. And that ID is the value that we put in this for. So if I put input 2 in here, or I left off this 1, these two might as well not even exist as far as how they relate to each other. It's only by duplicating that information right there that these two are able to be linked up like that. There's another way where you can put the input inside of the label, but that's kind of less common, and I wouldn't recommend it personally, because then you start getting into stuff where like you start using your label tags as like kind of structural elements, when really you just kind of want to move that label around relative to an input, and you don't want to tie it to necessarily to how the input is being rendered. So another way is with an Arya attribute, and that's with this Arya labeled by, and that's when you've got multiple pieces of information that you can use in conjunction with something. So it's kind of an opposite version of what we're doing up here with the label. So with the label, we're trying to duplicate what's in the ID of an input. But with the input, we're trying to duplicate the IDs of the descriptions that we're trying to get. So for this input 2 ID, we have our Arya labeled by attributes. And the first one is div1, which gives you the primary text, the string right there. And then the div2, which gives you the little text. And when a screen reader looks at that, for instance, it'll read that out as primary text. It'll combine those two together. Same thing here below. You got div1 and div3. Those are you're saying that these are my labels for this element, and it's going to read out primary and number. So the next is the title attribute. If you've ever gone to xkcd.com, if you're familiar with that website, you can, whenever you hover over the comics, there's usually like a second joke that pops out. So the title, that's what the title attribute does, is it includes that information. Basically it's just there so that you know, you wanna include some hover text for something. The next one is the hidden attribute. So this is saying that this element shouldn't be shown to anyone, shouldn't be talked about, shouldn't be looked at, shouldn't even be considered. In fact, what are you even talking about, elements? I have no idea what we were talking about in the first place. Nobody's going to pay attention to this element if it has a hidden attribute on it. So it's not going to be seen in the browser. It's not going to be talked about or announced by the screen readers. No assistive technology is going to take into mind. Pretty much the only way you can access it is if you look at the HTML itself, or you specifically ask with JavaScript to get to hidden the elements for that have that hidden attribute. It's a hardcore, super powerful way of saying that give up on this element. Do not even try to make it part of your documents in any sort of schema. So I'm almost like an escape hatch in a way. So next are the last three here that I've got are input examples. First is disabled and second is read-only. These two are kind of very similar to each other in that they both make it so that you can't do anything with the input, but they have kind of slightly different meanings to them. In fact, you'll see a lot of people use them interchangeably, even though you really shouldn't. So for instance, for disabled is saying that this input shouldn't be, or it can't be interacted with. And well, an input or a button or anything like something else like that. And there's usually a reason for that, where it's like you need to fix some other part of the page, like, or you need to click a checkbox that agrees to the terms and conditions, and then we'll enable this button for you. We'll remove the disabled attribute. Or you need to signal some way that this part of a form actually applies to you. So once you give that signal, then you remove the disabled attribute and you can interact with that. Conversely, with read-only, that's meant to be more presentational type information. You're never really supposed to be editing read-only information. So like on a budget grid, for instance, where some of the fields can be read-only, or some of the fields can be edited, but others can't, and that changes depending on like what the stage of the format is. You would want to use, or stage of the report is in, where information that comes from outside the document itself, then that would be an example of when you would use a read-only tag. So the final is final attributes. And actually I thought of one more, and that I'll talk about really quickly after this. But that's the required attribute, which is saying that, okay, I've got a form. This element has to be filled out, otherwise you can't submit the form. And then after that, the one I just thought of is the alt attribute. And that's mainly used for images when you want to specify another name for the image when it's being downloaded. So if you got like image1.jpg that you're linking in from a folder, but when they download it, you want it to be as a different file name, then you can do alt equals like the folder name that you're linking it to it from instead, .jpg or whatever. So that's kind of all the basics that you need to know. I'll take a pause really quick again and solicit some questions from you all. Is there anything that any of you would like to ask? All right, so now we're on to the final section. This is just going to be kind of a quick overview of different parts of a website and kind of looking at examples of what all that is in practice. So as I mentioned before, this isn't a real website. This isn't like an actual real life example that I pulled from somewhere. It's just an example of these concepts. So if you decide to use this code directly, you should keep in mind that you will have to do a lot more on top of that to turn it into a full-fledged website, starting with the CSS. But as far as how things are structured, this is basically the recommended pattern that you want. And there are more details about this that I'm leaving out. For instance, I only have one footer and one header tag, but you can technically have infinite number of those. Just like you can see that I have a nav here, and then I have nav elements in each of these articles. So some of these are ones that you're only going to want to use once, like main. But some of these are ones that you're going to want to potentially use many times throughout a document. So 3 major sections. You got your header, your main, and your footer. And this is a kind of an example of what maybe a blog page would look like the index for a blog using Semantic HTML. So the first is that you've got your skip links here. So skip links are an accessibility standard for allowing people to skip directly to content somehow. So if they can't look at a screen, for instance, but they have some way of gathering up the links and interacting with those links, then those first 2 links there, the nav and the main, that's going to be their way for them to get straight to the navigation, straight to the main content for a page. And those should be on every single page of your site. So there's a link here to a WebAIM webpage. WebAIM is kind of one of the premier organizations for pushing kind of accessibility, pushing forward on accessibility and making progress on that front. We actually at CodeStack, we're actually required to have, I believe it's A or higher ranked on WebAIM's accessibility tool. So it's if you get into where you have to do double A. Oh, it's double A. We have to be double A or higher on accessibility. So if you get into a situation where you have to do accessibility testing on your site, then you're probably going to be using a WebAIM tool or going by standards that were drawn up with WebAIM's input or influence. So it's good to know about them, and it's good to know about these skip links, the skip nav specification for that part. So after that, you got your this is the part that parts that most everyone has, and that's a header. So top part of your website, that's like your banner, your top menu, your site title, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see for this example, I've got 2 items here. I've got a nav, and my nav has an Arya label on it. I didn't want to put that as a separate element like a div and link to it somehow or anything like that. The best way I could label it was with the Arya label. And because it's also with the nav element, when it's announced, it'll be announced as primary navigation. So you can use these, I kind of just included these navs as examples down here, but you can use these same principles down here. So you can put Arya label equals article 1 and it'll read out article 1 navigation, for instance. So inside this primary nav in the header, we've got our menu, which we're using an unordered list for that. And we've set the role attribute on that to be menu to signal that this is supposed to be the navigation menu for this nav element, the menu for the link set for this element. So we've got the menu for the unordered list and the menu items for the list items. And then inside of those, we've got our actual anchor tags for our links. And then rounding it out just below that is the header, the H1 tag, which announces the blog's header title, which is blog, greatest title ever. So after our header, our first major section. We got our second major section, which is main, which is literally the main content of the document, of the website, of that page. So for this, we've got a set of articles, and these are the top 3 articles, either most recent or most viewed, or whatever metric you're using to display articles or sort articles by, or your blog posts, I should say. We've got kind of our titles, and we've got those ... Those would be like descriptions. For the nav section, those might be things like tags, different tags that you would have in there, like, filed under foo, filed under bar, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a link to the article itself. So one thing I want to point out is the other example of Arya labeled by here. This actually points at an element that is inside of the article itself. So it is totally possible for you to reference a child element using Arya labeled by. In fact, you can reference any element on the page. I could put something in the footer that said, this is a label. And if I changed this Arya labeled by to foo, then it's going to read out this is a label as the description for this article, rather than the article heading as the description. And then, and then after our articles, we have a link to the next page where you can look at more examples of the articles, for instance, more previews, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, at the very bottom, we've got our footer. And that's where we put our copyright information. That's where we can put loose links across the page, et cetera, things of that nature. You don't need to use navs in footers. I want to point that out. You can have just a bunch of unstructured links in your footer, so like a privacy policy and things of that nature, and you don't need to put those inside of a nav. It's kind of overkill for something like that. But yeah, so that's basically it. That's my presentation. Went for about 40 minutes. Any questions? All right, everybody learned perfectly. I'm going to assume that you all would score 110% if I were to pass out the test that I wrote up for you all.
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
Great job, buddy.
Thank you.
Hey, you know what would probably be like a nice second class and stuff, like going over, you may have already done it, what you talked about, like not using tables and how to use the DOM to do, CSS to do a lot of cool layout stuff, This is good for the future.
Yeah, I think I would very much like to give a talk about CSS in the future and talk about how you would do kind of like, for instance, the Holy Grail with the 10 column setup with the sidebar and the 2 sidebars and the header and stuff like that. Yeah. So like the different common patterns in CSS and websites, that how you would implement them using things like Flexbox and Grid. Yeah, I'd really love to do that.
That would be nice, my friend. Good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey Zach, I got a question.
Hey.
Did you show what that blog HTML renders as, or did you just show the HTML?
I was just showing the HTML. I can show you what it renders as, but it's not going to be very. It's gonna look like a web page, like a default web page.
I'd just be curious to see if anyone wanted to see what a screen reader sounds like, maybe.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't have a screen reader myself.
Okay. Yep.
My information comes from like reading about this stuff, where it's like, this is what all the specifications say, the guides say, this is what people who do use screen readers. I watch videos of how this stuff is used, so I could show a video if that's what everyone wants to see, where it kind of gives an example of a person using like a screen reader and what that sounds like, because it probably doesn't sound like what you think it does. So let me see if I can find an example of that. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is trying to?
Yeah, I think it would have been it would be a cool addition to if you have like the effective HTML accessibility versus not effective accessibility.
Oh, here's a video from 4 years ago about using a screen reader. So can y'all see and hear this?
I can see it so far.
Can you hear it?
No sound.
No
Yeah,
sound.
it's not capturing audio.
It's not? Okay. So
Maybe share the link.
yeah, I'll just share the link there. I don't know what screen reader necessarily they're using, but you can find, yeah, that's I think it's JAWS is the most common one. And it sounds like a robot. It's very, like, if I had to use JAWS all the time, like at least at the beginning, I would feel very disconcerted by having how the information reads out. But you know, I'll post this link as well. I'll post these in the Slack, the Meetup Slack, so that everybody can view those in the Slack as well.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. And good
No
job.
problem. Thank you.
Wow, JAWS actually does sound a bit irritating.
Yeah, I don't. It feels like an insult to blind people to have to use
It'd be
something
really
like
cool
that
if
to
they
me.
made like a Morgan Freeman screen reader or something like that.
Yeah, use like Google Tech with John Legend. Have John Legend read down all your web pages.
Yeah. Someone needs to hit up John Legend with that suggestion.
Someone needs to hit Google with that suggestion so they can take their tech that takes like 5 seconds of John Legend's voice and turns it into a Siri voice. Because that's a thing they already did.
Wait, they did do that?
Oh yeah, they have their AI tech. I'm trying to remember the name of it offhand, and I can't. But their AI tech with sound is able to take very, very little source material and turn it into a fully reconstructed human voice for anything.
Wow, that's amazing, and also kind of creepy.
Yeah, they announced that they were going to handle phone calls automatically using that tech at Google I/O, and it would even include stuff like ums and ahs and stuff to make it sound like a normal person was talking. So if you're talking on the phone as like a customer service person, you don't necessarily know, using Google's tech, that you're actually talking to a person if they're calling from an Android phone. It could just be Google Assistant calling them and using their voice, using your voice. I'm trying to think of which channel I should be posting these links into. Should it just be the general channel?
Yeah, I'd say that would be fine.
That's JAWS link. And that's the other link that I had. All right. One more thing I want to point out too is if you go to GitHub, it was CodeStack SJ? Yes. If you go to this URL here, and I'll post that in the chat as well. You can see all the presentations that we've done so far. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel here a second, and then while he's doing that, I'm going to actually upload this presentation, the files I have here. But you can go there and you can check out not just the files from this one, but from all the other presentations we've done as well. So, Daniel, you want to take over and lead us to the next section?
Yeah. Just one last thing, Zach. Are there any like learning materials that you want to reference related to your presentation? Any
Yeah.
helpful links?
So I mentioned some links at the very beginning. I'll show them again here. There's a bunch of accessibility guides on MDN. And so if you go to the GitHub page after I upload these here in a minute, you can check out all these links yourselves and start reading through those guides. There's lots and lots and lots of good information in there. I'd say that this is probably one of the best jumping off points for getting more and more into these different things. So I'll get that uploaded here right now.
So if any of you guys want to go deeper into this, you can download our GitHub repo and go to that project, and those links will take you to some further reading materials. Joanne, are you ready for the Ask a Designer portion?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. Actually, I just recently decorated my background, so I'm gonna share a video so I can show off my background here. It's kind of dark though. Hello, can you guys see me?
We can see you.
Awesome. Okay, so just a brief wait, Zach, can you make your, I can hear myself.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, cool. So I'm Joanne. I'm a UI UX specialist at CodeStack, but I do mostly anything media related. So I kind of identify as multimedia designer too. So if you have any questions regarding design, well, mostly since this is a programmer's meeting, it would be probably about UI, user interface, or user experience design. But I can also answer questions on graphic design, print design, layout design. So there. Now I have my lighting. Cool. And then branding too, if anyone has any questions. Yes? Okay, there's a certain Louis asking a question. Hi Louis, nice to meet you. He said, do you design mobile first or desktop first? And why? Okay. I think the really right thing to do is design mobile first and then going up. But what I end up doing is I design desktop first, but always thinking about what this would look when I go to mobile. So I think most designers would say design mobile first, because that's really important. A lot of people don't even go on computers anymore. They just browse everything in their phones, just through a browser app, or when they do social media, they don't even go through the browsers, they just go through the apps. So it's really important to do mobile first when designing a website. But if I'm gonna be honest with what I end up doing, I usually design desktop first, and then, but always considering. So the important part is the consideration as to how this would look like in a mobile setting. So I'm designing something in a canvas size of a desktop, but I'm always conscious about, okay, if I do this, then how would it look like on mobile? So later on, when I code my design, I know exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to code it so that it works mobile as well. So yeah, it would really, the most important part is that you consider mobile all the time when you design things. Mobile, tablet, yeah. Because it's not like before where, you know, everyone only goes to the internet with desktop or laptops. Nowadays, it's people just browsing their phones. So really important, really important. Hope that answers the question. Anyone else? Because I also, if anyone has been in the Q&A section before, I also do like UI, UX exercises. So we can do that too if anyone doesn't have questions so far. Sometimes the exercises prompts more questions afterwards. So any other questions? Do some push-ups. No, I can't do it. I was gonna go on a story about how I used to do sports before, but I'm not gonna do that. Logo creation, fundamental steps. Are there any fundamental steps you follow or guidelines for logo creation? Yes. So for logo creation, it's really important that, well, one thing I'm gonna say is that it's really important for you to know what the brand is of what you're designing. And by brand, I mean, what does that company do or whatever it is, right? So what does this organization do? What's their vision? What's their mission? You have to know them to be able to design an identity for them. So that's what I mean by knowing their branding. Like, what's their tone? Are they more like in the professional formal side? Are they in the friendly side of things? So that should reflect on the logo that you are going to create for this particular organization or company or anything. Oh, I see my cat. Hello. Yeah. So one thing I can talk about is when I did a redesign for a college, the only thing they told me that they wanted to have there is that they want to be more collegiate. And then they sent me some samples of what they wanted, right? So it's all like the Georgetown University formal looking collegiate places. But so when I started designing it, right? Personally, since I've been working with the college for quite a long time now with their website, I didn't really think that their tone or the vibe that they give out as a college is the 100-year-old university feel, like formal, like, you know, UOP, like when you see UOP, the typefaces and the fonts that they use are like the formal ones, right? I don't really see their institution that way. So when I did their redesign, I made 3 versions, like 3 design studies that have 3 different feels. And then only one of them actually catered to what they said they wanted. And so the third one was, you know, the formal tone, the formal collegiate, like solid institution feel. And then the second one was more like minimalist feel, like almost like College of Arts vibe, wherein, you know, sans serif, just like hip, I would say, like hip and friendly was the second one, and the first one was more of a blend within those two, where it's collegiate but then also not formal, like more like collaborative, more like welcoming feel. And at the end, sorry, I just went to the whole story, but at the end they chose not the one that they wanted at first. They chose the one where it's more friendly, more collaborative, more vibey, if that makes any sense. Because that's really what they are as an institution. They're not really the formal, you know, solid 100-year-old university in the state or something. So yeah, so I guess the process that I did was able to help them as well to, you know, settle on the identity that they really wanted to show, you know, their students and their prospect students. And yeah, so that was a quick success story. I know that was just one question, but I kept going. Yeah, so yeah, know the brand, know exactly what they want to be represented as when you design their identity. Does that make any sense? Cool. I heard someone said yes. Hello, Joseph. Okay, so the question is, do I do both UI, UX, and development? Strictly speaking, no. I specialize in UI and then a little bit of UX. And then I can mark up my designs in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But when I'm designing like a whole system, let's say a student system, information system, or an app, then I don't develop those. I usually work with the mobile team or the software development team to do those bigger systems and apps. But mostly for you know, marketing websites, like our CodeStack website, CodeStack.org, those things I can develop myself, but not the dynamic system big ones. Yeah. So I focus more on the design part of things. And I know this topic is always the hot topic in our UI UX group chat. Is that one time we talked about it? The question was, do you really need? Are you really required to know code if you want to be a UI UX designer? And there are mixed opinions about it. But in conclusion, I think, well, personally, I would say you have to know how code works to be able to design things realistically. So it's not like you have to know how to actually develop your designs, but you have to always consider how your devs would code it, you know, technological limits as well. You have to think about that too. So yeah, I wouldn't say you should be required to know how to develop things, but yeah, you should always consider. You should always have the consideration when you design things, how it's going to be coded. Yeah, especially for apps and systems, I feel like, you know, I feel like companies would hire you for your expertise to design, and then most of the time they will have you work with dev teams to be able to develop your designs. I don't think I've heard anyone so far in my small circle that they designed it and then also developed it until the finished product. Most of the time we work with teams, especially at CodeStack. We work with teams. I always work with James. Hi, James. I annoy him all the time too. Okay, thank you for your question. Is there any other questions? Any follow-up questions? Yeah. Well, I see hand. What does the hand mean? Like raising hands?
Oh, I have a
Raising
follow-up
hand?
to that answer. Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, sure.
Joseph here. I was gonna ask, and this pertains more to the academy. For somebody who was interested in more of the UI UX field, does the academy kind of cover some of that? I don't know if you have any.
I think Daniel, you would probably be the one best equipped to answer that question. Huh?
Yeah, we actually have a few people who went to the academy that mainly do UI UX now. But as for the academy itself, it's definitely more focused on programming. But we do teach UI UX stuff in it because that is important.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be ideal, right? Like maybe in the future, we can have like pathways kind of thing. Like a student can go through like an introductory course and then go to different branches. Like, oh, I want to go as a programmer, then you go that way, and then oh, I want to be a UI designer, I go that way. That'd be nice. But so
Yeah,
far
that'd be
we
really
don't
cool.
we don't do it. But it's something really cool to visualize. That'd be nice. But I know personally, I go to the class a couple times each year to teach some UI UX stuff. But yeah, definitely the focus of the academy so far is software development. Cool. I just saw the hand thingy now. That looks nice. Like you can raise your hand. Anyone else? Yeah, I'm glad to see someone here is interested in design too. That's nice. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, can I ask you guys a question? Is anyone else here interested in design too, or you know, I mean, you can be interested in both things, but
Can I raise? Joseph again. You know, I do graphic design, and so that pathway that you just mentioned, doing like UI UX, is something I've definitely looked into. But I also am very interested in the programming aspect of it all. So I would be very interested to see how I can kind of mesh the two together eventually.
yeah, totally. Oh, I'm happy. This makes me happy. Yeah, for sure, especially with your mindset right now. It's a real good start because, I mean, I started as a graphic designer too, you know, in college and stuff, and then I just got pulled into this whole UI UX thing. It's been good, especially, yeah. I mean, I've said it again and again that you know people are more into browsing everything on their phones now. So, I mean, and also like other gadgets. So, product design is really important. UI design, UX design always has been really in demand lately because you know how, in the old times, and don't even know about it, just kidding. When we buy software, there's like a thick manual for you to go through just so you can understand how a certain software works. People won't bother at this point in time in 2020. People would not bother to check any kind of guidelines or manual just so they can use an app. Like, let's say Instagram. Like, you just got used to using Instagram. You never had to read a whole book about it, like how to post a picture, how to do a filter, whatnot. So that's why I feel like that's why product designers, UI UX designers are very in demand lately, especially now, because if people can't use your app, can't use your software, they're just gonna close the window and go away. They're not gonna, like, there's a lot of options now. If a certain product, an app or website or a system doesn't work for them, when their patients run, it's done. Like, they're not going to consume your product anymore. So it's really important field, I would say. Yeah. Well, good luck. Hopefully you get to transition, because I did, and it's been fun. I really like what I'm doing. It's a lot of problem solving too. Especially since you want to go into development too, and knowing both at the same time would help a lot, so that you can make realistic decisions in your design. Omar said, I do have a large interest in graphic web visual design. I have a degree in graphic design. I'm currently looking to expand my services with code programming and development. Yeah, that's really cool. We see a lot of those for sure. I have personally experienced this transition or expansion, I would say. That's why that's why when, outside of work, when people ask what I do, I just say multimedia designer, because I can't really list everything. I'm not gonna say I do graphic, I do UI, I do print, here's a list of what I do. So yeah, especially if you have an eye for graphic design, then you'd probably transition pretty smoothly into UI visual design as well, because you know what looks good, right? Like, not all people have the eye in making things look good, and so the thing that you would need now is how to design things that will work and would be user friendly, easy to understand. So it has to look pretty and be usable, and should work well. Well, you're welcome. That's such a nice thing to say. Oh, I think, I miss yoga nights. I think I used to go to the same yoga classes Omar, if I remember correctly. I miss yoga. I haven't done it because I'm lazy. But thank you, Omar. Thank you for always. I always see you at the meetups too, so that's nice. And I'm glad a lot of, I'm seeing people that are also interested in design. They go hand in hand. They're like programming, design, really different things, but they go hand in hand for sure. Having considerations to both of them will really help a person to become a great programmer and also a great designer. Any other questions? Ooh, gotcha. 10 a.m. Can I be awake at 10? I'm not sure. Thank you for the info. Does anyone want to do? Oh, okay. I see a hand.
Oh, sorry.
Hi,
Go
Joseph.
ahead. No, I know you were gonna say something, so I don't want to.
Oh no, I was gonna transition into some UI exercises if anyone doesn't have a question so far. But if you have another question, go ahead.
My question was going to be, what does your process look like when you're ready to hand off your files to, I guess, the developer? Just if there's a quick answer for it.
Okay, so I usually do a whole prototype, right, of my design. And okay, let me think of an example because it's kind of different each time depending on what it is. So, but what's cool is that I use Adobe XD to do my prototypes, and now you can generate a link inside Adobe XD, and it shows the developer or whoever you want to send it to. It will show them the design that you made, and then per page, there's like a downloads area on the side of the screen where they can actually download the whatever graphic you used or whatever icon you used. And then if they click on a certain element, let's say a text, they click on the text, they will see on the side what the font or what the typeface I used, what weight, what's the font weight, what's the font size, what's the color, what's the hex code. So Adobe XD does a great job doing that, making it a lot easier for the designer to hand off their designs to the dev. And then most of the time if it's not there, let's say, it doesn't cover everything, then the dev would, message me or something and ask more about it, or how does this work? Or do you have a SVG for this part? But what's the ideal thing to do though, is once you're done with your design, or actually while you're designing, it's always best if you do kind of regular meetings with everyone involved in the project. So this is what we did for one of the systems that we redesigned last year. Was every 2 weeks or maybe every 3 weeks we would design something, because it's a huge system. It's not just like one page that we had to redesign. We had to redesign the whole system, and this system was made maybe in the early 2000s, so it's really old, needed some updating everywhere. So it's not like we're just gonna risk in it. We are actually going to, kind of wipe off everything and redesign it. So the process we did is that we do a meeting with a project manager, a programmer there too, so that as a designer, I have his voice over there. If, let's say, I propose the design and it's like, well, that's impossible to do, or that would take like 100 hours to do, or something like it's not feasible to do, then it's that's when it's really important for you to always be in contact with the programmer, so that the programmer also knows your process, and then you also know their process. So yeah, so when we were working on this redesign, the programmer in charge was always there. And so it became easier at the end of the designing phase to hand it off to them, because now they're fully aware of what's going on. And then even when there are parts that they weren't able to brief themselves with, we also do design briefing meetings. Like after the whole redesigning, as the designer, I presented to program manager, the programmers involved, so that they know the user flows, how it looks like, what happens when you click on this button, what happens when you submit this form. So yeah, it's really important to be able to articulate your design to your programmers and project managers. So, because sometimes you give them the prototype and it's not really clear what the interactions are until you present it to them. So, yeah. So, okay, too long, didn't listen. Adobe XD can generate a link with all of the designs and elements and files, graphic files. And also, it's important for you to be able to present your design to your devs so that you're in the same page how the design works. Because it's important to always think about it that your design is not just how it looks, but it's mostly how it works. So you have to show whoever's developing it, you have to show them this is how I designed it to work. And then you have to agree on whether or not it's possible to do or feasible to do. Yeah. Hey, awesome. Yeah, that was a good question. I know it's not all the time that we get to do these process like consistently, but it's really important to know. Any other questions? Do you guys want to do quick exercises? Do we have time for that? Daniel?
Yeah, we have time.
What kind of exercises were you making?
Oh yeah, this is Zach's first time in a designer Q&A. So, okay, I'll show you. So I always do this like, when there's dead air and people don't have any more questions. Okay, so how do I, okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Share. Okay, you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a quick exercise, like, which you think is more accurate, which UI is more accurate, letter A or letter B, and then everyone puts their answer in the chat. How do I see the chat though? Wait.
You click on the ellipses.
Oh, right here, the more. Okay, I got it. Yeah, so let me know your answers. I'll give like maybe 10 seconds and then we can discuss what the right one is. A or B, which is more accurate? So I think the difference here is that here it just says add, and then here it says add to cart. Okay, I see a lot of A's. Cool, we'll see what there, anyone else? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so, okay, James is wrong. I'm sorry, James. But,
Congratulations.
okay, so I'm not gonna look at I'll try to explain before I look at what their explanation is. But for me, A is right because, with the add to cart, the button tells you exactly where it's gonna get added. And while here, you don't know, like, add to where? Is it just, saving it for later? Or is it actually adding it to cart? Or, it's not clear. So A is, better experience because then you tell them exactly what. Let's see. Yeah, so, yeah, you can do up to 3 words, they said. And that we want the context. Yep. Yay, I was right. Cool. Great job, everybody. James, you can try again.
JF 500 instead of 200.
Okay, next. Which is more accurate, letter A or letter B? For this one, I think the difference is the color. Options here, it's a drop down. Here, it's more like a radio buttons. I see B, I see B, I see an A, I see an A, I see a B. Okay, anyone else? Because what if they add 15 more colors? Okay, we'll see. B. Okay, so the right answer is, ta-da, B. Okay, so before we go to the explanation, I would think that James is right, that if there's more than 4 colors, then maybe you would go for the drop down. But it seems like they're showing that there's only 4, and that, you know, it's important to see all the colors at once so you can kind of compare your options. So that's why in this particular situation, B is more accurate. And then there you go. Okay, cool. See, it says here, when you have less than 5 options, this is the best way to go. And comparison of options is a priority. Correct.
So if you have 5 options or more, you should drop down. Or what Omar was saying with the plus thing.
There would be a plus color icon. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think this will work as well if you have more than 4. Because when I would think that when you open the drop down, then you would see the colors side by side, so you can still compare the colors together. And the plus as well. I think Target does the plus. Like if their product has multiple.
Yeah, I've seen the plus around.
Yeah, I think Target online shopping does it. So yeah, that's a great idea too. Yeah, plus when you see plus, you always think you can click on it and then you'll see more. We've been conditioned to think that. Okay, great job, everyone. Any questions so far before I move to the next? To the next exercise. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, here, which UI is more accurate, A or B? I see a lot of B's. B. Okay. Padang. Everyone is correct. Congratulations. So, anyone wants to say why they think B is the right one?
Is it because garden is misspelled?
Graden. Well, we don't know if that's misspelled. Maybe it's another language. Contrast is better, correct? Yeah, it's more on the readability side of things. Correct, exactly. So like here you can barely read London. Plus if you add that layer to it, then whatever photo is in the background, you can always read what the text says. Great. Okay, they use the word visibility.
That would actually time back into what we're saying about accessibility. That would actually fail the first example.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because there's no proper contrast between the background and the foreground. I don't know if they hear you. Did I hear you? Do you hear yourself?
I hear myself.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay. Okay, this one's pretty cool. A or B? C, B, everywhere. B, 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 B. Yeah, this one's pretty obvious. It is B. Oh, a contrarian spotted.
I like A better.
Well, it's B because, you know, if you have an empty space, then might as well use that for a call to action of some kind.
A context tab is not an advertisement. Sorry, I'll throw off by the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, so it says here, yeah, don't overlook empty states.
Yeah, that's another reason why James is because you already have one button that does that thing. You should only have one, 0, 1, or infinity.
That's a good point. I think they didn't remove it because it's separate. Like the plus will always be there, but the add contact is only there when it's empty because it's an empty state. Okay, good job everyone. This is the next one. Which is more accurate? I see an A, 2 A's, 1 B. Anyone else? Easy A. A. Okay, mostly everyone is A. Ta-da! Okay. So my answer is A too, because this goes to what colors mean, and most of the time, if you want to delete something, then it's a pretty high alert action. So by using red, the user will be more alerted. Like, are you sure you want to do this? But if it's green, it looks green is more like for, you know, saving things, like more positive things. So if you put delete in a green button, it's like there could be a chance that you're thinking you're gonna save it, but you're actually gonna delete it. So it could be misleading. Oh, there you go. Okay, there's a proper term for it. Destructive actions. If a destructive action is the primary action, it might be better to give it secondary treatment. But if it's the primary action, then the red button is gonna work.
Can I mention something?
Mhm.
I thought that it was B. If you go back to the other page, I thought it was B because the red there was unnecessary because you have the block for the delete, and so the color shouldn't be so in your face. Like the cancel was just a link looking thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But then when you use a certain color, colors always mean something. So it might be, there might be a chance that you mislead a user by using another color that means something else. So you don't usually use green for, as they said, destructive actions. So you might as well want to avoid potentially misleading your users by using contradictive color and action together. But yeah, I can see why you can think about it that way too. But it's just safer
That makes sense.
to to not use contradictive color and action together. Perfect. Okay, we're down to our last two. Do you guys have any questions so far? But okay. A or B, my friends? I see a lot of A's. A across the board? Okay, let's see. Ta-da! A is correct. And my answer is A too. Yeah. And I would think it's because it's more natural to say 17 left in stock than just to say left in stock 17. So you could be more conversational, blah. Yeah, in your design, because we want it to be as natural as possible, right? So when you're talking to someone, or let's say you're in a store, you know, talking to a customer and they're asking how many do you have left in stock, you wouldn't say left in stock 17, right? So you would probably say it in a more natural way as 17 left in stock. So
Can I steal your screen for a moment? Because I think this would actually be a good opportunity to give an example of some semantic HTML.
okay.
You'll probably have to mute your mic.
So I'm going to share my screen now. So what I wanted to point out about that was, so the first thing I thought of when I saw the second example, which was the 17, or the left in stock 17, is I thought of what that HTML would look like in each example. And I thought about why someone would actually want to gravitate towards the second one. And the reason why is because it's really, really easy to write code like this, where you have a div, and you can also, yeah, you can see my screen, right? Yeah, so you have a div, and that div has the image there that we saw before. And it also has the title, and maybe that's your H5, for instance. And then it has a label that says items left, or sorry, left in stock. And over here you have a span that says 17 or however much it is. It's really, really natural to write code like that. It might not actually be obvious, but you can, because when you go back the other way, especially with labels, people, a lot of times you'll want to have those being structured a certain kind of way where if you put it like this, it's not going to look right. Because of how you want labels to be treated and how labels are treated by default with things. So a different way to do it is using one of the tag sets that I mentioned before, which is the data lists, definition list, sorry, the definition list with the definition title and the definition description. So, and this would be, what this is good for is not just that, how you could write it right here is you could have a definition list, and then you have your definition title, which is left in stock, right? And then definition description, which is 17. And this definition title will be following the description when you actually look at it. But then when a screen reader looks at it, it'll know that because of the proximity, that left in stock is the descriptor for this 17 number. And if you wanted, you could even take it a step further where you reintroduce these stock twos, and then you say, I think you can use the for attribute for this. I don't remember offhand, or you could do sorry, you would put the ID on this one. So this would be equals a stock2 title, and then you would say that stock2 title describes this. So, and what this lends itself well to is that, say that you want to add more types of things where, so, okay, so you have 17 left in stock. Say there's another piece of data where it's like, what's another thing that you would think to put in there? Like a discount, for instance. So you could say 10%. So this would be stock2 discount. You say 10% discount right here. And you can keep doing this in the same over and over again. And this will all be grouped together as one section automatically as this one definition list where it's semantically implied by these tags that this is descriptive information about related to whatever is near it. So I just wanted to point that out for anyone who was looking at the second one, because it popped into my head that I was like, oh, this would be a good time to talk about the definition list, because that's kind of a lesser used one. So I'll kick it back to you, Joanne. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, that was good timing. Since we were talking about semantic HTML, and then now it all connects full circle, right? Cool, thank you, Zach. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna share it again. Yeah, that one's really cool because then, we're talking about design. Oh, but yeah, that's one thing that I forgot to say, I guess, or I haven't said, is that as a designer, you also always have to consider, or you have to include it in your process to think about accessibility. And in visual design, that's more like for colors, color contrast. And then when you code it, make sure that you always have accessibility in mind. So that's good information. Cool. So the last one that I have, wait, see the chat. Okay, the last one, which is more accurate. And this one is funny because I usually design, so in code stack, right? It's more like, student information system. So I always design those pages of like student information, right? Like name, birthday, age or grade level, and it always confuses me which one to bold or to do the strong tag. Is it height? Is it the description, or is it the value?
The default is for the title to be bolded with the description list.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying that it always confuses me. Like no matter how much I work with those kind of designs, it's like, because there's like conceptions to that. The value is more important, so maybe bold that. But see, the answer, most of people said A, and then 1B. Okay, let's see. Ta-da! So the answer is A. And that's because, to explain it, when you skim through this information, like if you see a bunch of numbers are bolded, like, but what does those numbers mean? and then you have to look at the description. But if you look at the description first and then look at the value, then you know exactly what that value means. So that's why the descriptions are like higher in the text hierarchy of things. So let's see. There you go. So emphasize the label. Yes, because they're trying to find the words and not before the value. Yeah, so once they see the description, and then the value follows. So it's just the train of thought, I guess. Instead of going to the value first and then knowing what it meant in the description. Yep. So that was my last exercise. Are there any other questions? Anything that popped up after the exercises? Did you guys think this is useful? Did you guys learn anything? I like doing this because, you know, it's just small differences, but it really matters. And even the users won't realize it until they experience better design, you know? Any other questions? I'll stop sharing so I can see the things. Comments, suggestions? Am I like allowed to promote my Twitter? I made a design Twitter if you guys want to follow that.
Yeah, I don't see why
I'll
you
type
can't.
it in the message. Yeah, right? There you go, I'm done. Any other questions? Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, the highlight for me in this meetup today is knowing that there are people that goes to these meetups and that go to this meetup and, you know, are interested and happy to know more about design. So that's nice. Last call. Okay, cool. If you guys have any other questions later, maybe when, you know, it's not meetup time and you guys are working on something, you can put your questions in the Slack channel, or if you specifically want to ask me, you can also DM me on Twitter. But for any programming questions, you know, general design questions as well, the Slack channel for the meetup is there for you. Cool, thank you guys. Hope you're enjoying. Yes, hopefully. I hope we get to do our yoga again. Thank you. You're welcome, and thank you as well. Thank you for coming to our meetup. Okay, cool.